What's good, YouTube? Once again, it's the one and only OG Hollywood coming back at you with another edition of the Ferguson Chronicles, where we keep it number 110 all the way across the board, right? Today's episode, I'm interviewing a guy by the name of Mr. Lorenzo. He's here to tell his story and his time spent in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. And like I always tell you, everybody's story is different. And today is no different. So without further ado, let me tap in Mr. Lorenzo, please. What's up, Renz?
Hey, salutations to you.
Oh man, I'm glad you can come on the Ferguson Chronicle and tell your spiel, man. That's the most important thing, man. People need to know who you are, what you stand for, and how much time you spent in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and when was the first time you entered the hallways of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, man. So do me a favor, man. Go ahead and tell the people where you're from and what led you to prison.
Okay, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I'm born in Sicily. I grew up in Brooklyn, and I came to Dallas in 1980. And I went to via West Dallas, stayed over just on Burnell Street, the Tempe apartments, and then over at Palacios. That was the barrio. And then found myself in 1981. With 22 years in TDC.
So 1981, man. Most people can't even reflect on 1981, man. So if you don't mind, tell me what was the first unit that you hit in 1981?
Well, at first when I went to trial, and I got it was beginning of 81. I went to trial for 2 aggravated robberies and got convicted, and I went back to back, and I got 10 years for the first one and 12 for the second one, and they were ranked consecutive. And when I first went down, I went to Clemens Unit. I stayed approximately at Clemens. I got there, B wing, knew a few guys from Dallas. Went to B wing, what B line they called it. Stayed there for 2 months, and then went back on bench warrant. I had to go out there, and there was some appeal stuff I had to do. And at this time, TDC was really overcrowded. So when I came back, I didn't go back to Clemens. I went to East Ham. I was one of the youngest dudes on East Ham at that time. I was 18 years old, and I was on J line, and I was building tender Sonny Evans line. And I stayed away, and I don't want to keep on going forward, but I was on East Ham for 2 years, and I did go back on bench warrant and reversed one of my 12-year sentence. I gave it back. So when I came back, I only had 10 years. So and then I found myself on Coalfield.
So let me ask you this, man. So you said B line, right?
Say again?
And so you said you was on B line, right?
On Clemens?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was Sonny Evans' wing, right?
No. That was Clemens. That's when I first hit Clemens Unit. I was on B line, okay? And I was there for 2 months, and I went back on a bench warrant. And then they shot me, and that's when they shot me in the East Ham. On East Ham, I was on J line.
Okay. So East Ham, you was on J line, right?
Yeah.
And at that particular time, they still had turnkeys and building tenders, right?
Oh, yeah, 81, yeah, definitely.
Okay, so what was the individual that ran J line?
That was Sonny Evans.
Okay, Sonny Evans, right?
Right.
Now we on the right track.
Right.
So let me ask you this, man. So this is for the viewers, man, because everybody don't know what a building tender is. Everybody don't know what a turnkey is. But you were here today to expound on that and let people know exactly what a building tender is and a turnkey is, right?
Right.
So what exactly is a building tender?
Well, I can sum it up real quick. A building tender is an inmate police. Okay. Now, to become a building tender, you have to go through a classification. Okay. You have to get approved by the administration. All right. It's administration. It's not something the warden, the warden or the captain doesn't select you. It's not, it's a classification thing. Okay. And on East Ham, they selected the creme de la creme. I mean, they had, some of the baddest building tenders, but, and I'll get into that in a minute, but on East Ham, you're dealing with some real thugs, some real killers, and they've been like Sonny Evans. He had more pull on East Ham, and anybody watching this that was on East Ham in the day that knew Sonny Evans, or, they can actually vouch for this, but he could probably took the whole prison unit, walked out the compound with them. He had that much juice, and anyway, they do the work. See, at this time in TDC, they really couldn't get a lot of people to work as prison guards. So to compensate for that inadequacy, they would get they get BTs. They would count. They did everything the boss would do, just like the turnkey. They're responsible for opening up the doors, letting you in, making sure you go to your lay-ins, turning out the work, whatever. That was done by an inmate. The boss's duty was very minimal. Okay, they did something, but sometimes it would pass out mail, but a lot of times the BT passed out mail. They kept count. They did all functions what you see a TDC boss would do.
So let me ask you this. So during your time in Texas Department of Criminal Justice, right? Have you ever had any run-ins with turnkeys and building tenders?
No, not really. I mean, you have to understand. I mean, you get checked by them. Don't get me wrong, and there ain't nothing you can do. Like they'll call me when you ride up, they're in your face. You know what I mean? They're gonna tell you what's up. But now I've seen a few people that had, and they got dealt with bad. And I've seen a couple, and we were talking earlier about like Tyrone Cotton. Tyrone Cotton, and there was a nephew and uncle out of Houston, I think 5th Ward, that they were nervous of these guys because they were rowdy. They didn't give a damn, and they would jam up a BT or turnkey in a second, Now Tyrone, they did understand that when the rank showed up and the BTs there, that was going to be a checkmate. I mean, they can't. That's the administration right there. But like individually, if they jammed them, if they jammed them up, they were nervous. They put kid gloves on with Tyrone Cotton and this this dual team out of 5th Ward in Houston, And I told you about an individual named Kung Fu. Kung Fu, he was an exception to the rule because, he came down and sat on a bench that was belonged to the BT. Sonny Evans jammed him up. And long story short, he sat Sonny Evans down with a kick to the chest. That's the only time I ever seen, Sonny Evans, man, get floored, man. And he got back up. The BTs came in, and then you had Captain Price. Captain Price, that was a sorry motherfucker. That was, and he came in there with some other BTs, and they had batons, and they took it to Kung Fu. Now, respect goes to Kung Fu because I witnessed this. I got no reason to make this hyperbole, but they couldn't take him down. He would not go down. He swept a BT from his feet. Now, now if you ever seen somebody use martial arts, it's not like that, or orchestrated, stuff you see in the movies. It's more like that stuff we see on UFC. And sometimes they got and Kung Fu had beautiful kicks. this guy can actually stand almost vertical, man, with one leg in the air. He studied martial arts since he was a kid, and he utilized everything he had. He was the real deal. And so when I tell you, man, the PTs couldn't take him down, that's a testament, man, to his skills, his tenaciousness, toughness, and so. And then, it's, real deal. That's what real convicts are made of right there. Now they sent him to the infirmary when they brought him back. All right. Now he was, he was messed up a bit, man. Come on. You just got hit, with batons by several individuals, but, he didn't show it, man. He didn't break, it was like, like any other encounter he probably had to deal with, you know what I mean? It didn't really affect him. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So, what was the day room set up like down there when you was there, as far as race wise?
Well, it was it's segregated, it's segregated, in a way like you had it was mixed. It was a completely segregated, like 81. You know what I mean? They had that Ruiz lawsuit start to open up, right? And so they started, before, like in the 70s, it was like completely, you had, blacks on, one wing, and then you had, Hispanics and whites on another, kind of like most of the units were. But by 81, they started putting, they started, integrating, the wings, or probably by about 1980, and but when you went to the day room, you had, there wasn't really no gang, there was no gangs at that time. I mean, there was the TS was probably the oldest gang in prison, you know what I mean, and they kept quiet about it. They were like kind of, there were a bunch of people that, there were people that kind of consolidated, and if they had to get was, take care of business, they would. But it wasn't like, there were prison gangs, ran, and it was, you were just doing what you were told, because the BT was the, that was the governing authority. All right. There was no slamming dominoes. There was no yelling when you watched like a Cowboy game or the Houston Oilers game. You didn't do a lot of yelling, a lot of applauding. If your team made a touchdown, you're like, okay, yes, but it's not, you didn't make any kind of rowdy noise.
So let me ask this. So if in fact you did get out of character and make any kind of rowdy noise, what was the penalty for that?
Okay, let's say you're playing games and you're slamming dominoes. The first one is going to, the first sanction, if you want to call it that, your BT is going to tell you, hey, man, keep that shit down. Okay? Second time, they're going to come over and deal with you. They're going to take you, they're going to take you out on the run and beat the hell out of you.
So I want to ask you about a couple of individuals that I heard about along the way that was in prison because, and I heard this from my father because my father was a building attendant from 1968 to 1978 on the Brandon Hill Clemens unit, right?
Right.
They would leave off the unit, for whether it may be basketball, boxing, baseball, things of that nature, right? Just penitentiary sports, right?
Right.
During your time in prison, man, what were some of the guys that stood out to you that was on the boxing team?
Okay, you had like a couple of them. You had like Tyrone Cotton. Tyrone. He made a name for himself. And I never seen the dude really kind of lose a fight. They used to get, I think it was on Saturday. Now they used to bring people from other units, but not a lot. Like I hear it, they might have did that back prior to I got there, but they didn't do that so much. You just basically fought the guys on your unit. Now I heard one guy saying that was happening on Ellis or whatever, and that might have been. I couldn't speak up for Ellis. On East Ham, they did it a few times. They brought people over from Retrieve, Huntsville Unit, Coalfield, and they boxed, but that was like, that happened probably, and they brought them all together, you know what I mean, at East Ham, and that was for pretty much the BT and the guards' pleasure, but they couldn't really do that on a basis, because that was like transportation, that was guys, that was like utilizing them to go, back and forth, and so, and remember I told you they had staff shortages, okay, so. Like on the weekends, you're not going to get too many people that want to drive a bus unless it was emergency, Now, but yeah, like I said, it did happen, but not so often. But like I said, the ones that I remember, there was Pee Wee. He was a BT and he boxed. He was pretty good. There was a white dude named, they call him Red West out of Houston. He was good, but you put him against someone like Tyrone Cotton, because they're in a pretty much weight division, and and Tyrone Cotton would really beat the brakes off Red. Red was good for, what I mean. He was better than average, but if you get to the creme of boxers, Tyrone Cotton had a pretty much, he had a game, and that's really how he was a street fighter as well as a boxer, and I put him in a category, man, as a bull, man, because. He was impressive. You know what I mean? I'm a hard guy to impress. I really am, and because I box myself. And but Tyrone Cotton, yeah, he could go pro. In my opinion, I think he would have made a great light heavyweight. Would he been a champion? I can't say, but I would say he would be a top contender.